Greetings. Many people are confused by what we mean by Shikantaza. It seems to be an elusive kind of practice. Many of us are looking for where to place our mind. And I recently received a question from a viewer that says the following. I'm struggling with how to figure out what it practically means to just sit with the quote unquote sensory doors open, because my mind wants to focus on something, a sound, a visual object, my breath, a little pain in the neck, etc., etc., either because it enters the sensory doors spontaneously or because I start searching for something to focus on. So, what would you recommend I do when the mind starts wandering about? So that's the question. It's a fantastic question. There are probably many ways to respond effectively to this particular question. And I would be careful to respond, and unless I knew who I'm, the situation particular to the person that I'm talking, that I would give the response to. So when I first started to practice meditation, my teacher is a Soto Zen teacher, and she taught Shikantaza. But when I first started to sit, she encouraged focusing on our breathing so that we follow our breathing, count our exhales from 1 to the number 10, and anytime the mind wanders off, then return it to the number 1. It's a very simple way of practicing. And I did that for a while, and I found I could get to maybe 3 or 4 before my mind started wandering. And then I would return it to number 1 and continue to count in that way. And it was a very useful practice because I got to see how much my mind wandered, and I had the experience of continually bringing it back to the present moment, bringing it back to my object of awareness. What isn't being said here is that when I was practicing that particular form of meditation, I was also sitting with my teacher in the same physical location. I can't say enough about doing that. And you might find it impossible wherever you are to sit with another person, to sit with a bona fide teacher as a guide, particularly in the Soto tradition. Maybe there's nobody near you. Maybe there's no one that you can trust at the present time. That's understandable. That was not my experience. My experience was that I had access to a teacher to sit with. And I would suggest to you that beyond a technique like counting your breathing, Shikantaza is a relationship. It's a relationship between a teacher and a student. So even though I was given the instructions to follow my breathing and to focus on my breath every time my mind wandered about, I was also forming a relationship with a teacher, sitting in the same space as a teacher. These days, of course, you could also sit online. It's an option as well. But to sit in the same room, at least at the very same time as somebody who's been practicing for much longer than us, can be very, very helpful, because we don't just get a technique, we share the same energy. The air that we breathe is the same. We learn not just by what somebody says, but their actions. And so learning takes place on an unconscious level with Shikantaza. We sit in the same space as a teacher and we learn Shikantaza. I think that's how it happens. It's not something that we employ. And this is what transmission is. In the meantime, we can continue to practice following our breathing, but I would also encourage finding a teacher to work with on some kind of a regular basis, whether it's once a week or once a month, to sit with that person in the same space if possible, if not, sitting online with that person. I hope that helps. Thank you very much for your question.